よく言われるのは自分が好きじゃない人っていうのは自分の理想が高いからだっていうのもよく言われるんですけど、なんかそれはそういう苦しみっていうのを。
When exactly is it that we start hating ourselves? A boy too depressed to go on living, much less pilot an Eva, a girl that masks her vulnerability and deep insecurity with narcissistic bravado, and a doll that gives the illusion of life but is nothing more than a walking corpse. What do these three have in common? They're all Evangelion pilots. Yes, but why? Because they're all missing something. What are they missing? Mothers? Self-worth. Everyone in Evangelion is flawed. Shinji's guardian Misato wrestles with her womanhood and wanting to be a good mother figure for Shinji. Gendo is too much of a coward to show his son affection. Ritsuko can't help but make the same mistakes as her mother. And Kaji can't be honest with his feelings. It's a convoluted story containing cryptic religious imagery, pseudo-scientific jargon, and hidden conspiracies. But even amongst all of that, the most complex part of the show are the emotions of its characters. And at the center of this complexity are three damaged teenagers who are also Evangelion pilots: Shinji, Asuka, and Rei. It's because they're missing a part of themselves that makes them the only ones capable of piloting an Eva. But it comes with an expectation that they'll save humanity. But how can they save humanity when they can't save themselves from the weight of their own expectations? Expectations are really just beliefs, but our relationship with expectations often reveal a lot about the way we interact with ourselves. Why is that important? Because the way we interact with ourselves affects the way we move forward through life, whether it's jogging briskly or stumbling at every turn. Take Shinji and Asuka for example. Having both traumatically lost their mothers at a young age and having strained relationships with their fathers, they're both weighed down by childhood trauma that manifests for them in opposite ways, essentially making them two sides of the same coin. In order to cope, Shinji turned inward by withdrawing himself from the world and the people in it, while Asuka turned outward by trying to get people to look at her to prove that she is worthy. Interestingly enough, you'd think that by turning inward, Shinji's expectations would also be focused inward. On the contrary, Shinji places his expectations on other people. He expects the world to change first before he does. He thinks that just by doing what he's told, by piloting the Eva, that the people around him will change, that his father might love him more. He doesn't feel worthy of love and ignores what he wants, what he needs, in favor of people-pleasing. This is taking the easy way out, the most painless. By doing this, Shinji uses it as an excuse to run away from dealing with himself, so he can put the blame on others when things don't go his way. But he fails to realize that all of his people-pleasing is only hurting him because he's sacrificing himself in the process. He's continually giving his worth away to other people by giving them the power to determine how he should feel about himself. Now Asuka, being headstrong about achieving things through sheer force of will, places her expectations on herself. She is the maker of her own destiny. However, she uses her achievements to cover up dealing with her deep-seated insecurity, the feeling of inadequacy that was instilled in her when her mother failed to recognize her as her daughter and instead abandoned her for a doll. This forever bruised her ego to be constantly seeking attention, to prove that she is worthy of being looked at. And when she's first introduced, there are a few subtle hints in her self-absorbed behavior that make it seem like she might be trying to compensate for something, but nothing too alarming. For the most part, she seems strong-minded and confident with little to no doubt in her abilities. She expects great things of herself, which justifies why she's so competitive, until we start to see what happens when her place in the hierarchy is threatened. When she sees that Shinji starts doing better than her at piloting the Eva, this begins a steady decline in her mental state. She becomes more aggressive, obsessive, and eventually unstable. It starts to become clear that she defines herself by being at the top, and if she starts to fall too far behind with no hope of keeping up, she crumbles. It's a problem when a desire to be great becomes a need. This is where expectations become dangerous, when they're tied to your sense of self. And this is the problem both Shinji and Asuka have. They don't have a solid foundation to stand on. There is no core identity to rely on. Their selves are tied to the external circumstances around them, whether it's approval from other people for Shinji or achievements for Asuka. As soon as they are threatened, they topple over and unravel or close themselves off from the world. Their parents didn't instill in them the love and security they needed to nourish stable identities because they basically didn't have parents, and now they seek out those needs in the only way they know how, even if their methods end up hurting them over and over again in the long run. One example of this is their relationship with each other. another. Asuka expects Shinji to reach out to her and comfort her, while Shinji expects Asuka to act more caring toward him, but they never truly once try to understand one another. Their low self-worth has them clinging to the same course of action when it comes to handling their problems. Asuka doesn't get the reaction she wants out of Shinji, she defaults to berating him harder, to make him pay attention to her, while Shinji just defaults to believing her harsh words at face value and retreating further away. By not putting down their guards and letting go of their beliefs of what each other should be like, they're never able to have an honest and sincere line of communication. In the end, their feelings never reach. Their expectations hinder them from having the ability to build anything meaningful. Now, let's talk about Rei, who has a different mindset toward expectations, which is to have none. And this is where I need to make a clarification. Up until now, I've been making expectations out to be the bad guy, but it's a little trickier than that. Not all expectations are inherently bad because having some level of them can actually be good. It gives us something to strive for. It's when we make expectations unrealistic or inflexible as a means of putting pressure on ourselves that it slowly wears us away, as is the case with Asuka. Or when we wish for our reality to be a certain way but then suffer when it isn't, like Shinji. However, what happens when we wish for nothing? We suffer in a different way, because even though we are largely unaffected by life's circumstances, we deprive ourselves of living, of being people. Rei is detachment taken to the extreme, someone that just does what she's told with no defiance. She's a blank slate for anyone to exert their will upon because she knows deep down that she is disposable, and for this reason, she doesn't bother to attach herself to anything or anyone for that matter, knowing that it's as pointless as her life. She doesn't put pressure on herself or have any goals because unlike Shinji and Asuka who crave the part of themselves that's missing, she doesn't have a self to begin with. This is also why it's so significant when she defies Gendo in the End of Evangelion and chooses to start Third Impact on her own terms. It shows that she does in fact possess a will of her own to live however she chooses, and that she had it all along. To have expectations and goals is natural, good even. It shows that we're alive and that we want to grow. However, when expectations go unchecked, they can be like a prison, distorting our view of ourselves and by extension, the way we see the people around us, including our loved ones. Because in reality, unrealistic expectations are just a way we use to punish ourselves. They thrive off the parts of ourselves that we can't accept, the ones that we're trying to crush into submission. But no matter what we do, no matter how much we distract our minds, we can't escape how much we hate ourselves.
まあ好きといえば好きですけど、結構嫌いなところもあります。
嫌いなところはどんなところですか？
自分が出てるところ。
To really understand Eva and its characters, we must understand its creator, Hideaki Anno. Eva is a very flawed and personal story that uses all of its convolution to distract the viewer from its true identity, which is Anno himself. Anno has always been a very troubled person. Having come out of a long bout of depression where he could do nothing for 4 years, Anno came into Eva with one singular and desperate focus that can be summarized in one familiar line: you can't run away. Because of this, he imbued his feelings and struggles into his work. But just how much of himself did he imbue? According to Anno, everything. However, for many viewers, the way he went about it wasn't appreciated. It's hard for them to reconcile their feelings of disappointment, anger, or confusion with Eva. The top complaints range from it being hard to follow, having a crappy ending, being too pretentious, or being something that only depressed people would be able to appreciate. On some level, this is understandable because it's a show that never is what it appears to be, as it continuously breaks down its characters and the narrative around them until there is none. It's like a person, selfish and rebellious, doing what it wants regardless of who sticks along for the ride, or rather doing what it needs to in order to come to its own conclusions. And that's really a reflection of Anno as a person and his mindset at the time. Because when he was asked about Eva's production, he described it as a live concert where he didn't know the end result. His only hope was that it would bring some form of change, whether it was in the characters, the audience, or from my interpretation, in himself. However, Anno's goals for the series weren't always altruistic. At some point through the production, seeing that the series was being well received by the otaku audience, he decided to directly challenge and defy their expectations. This is the point in the series where it became much more introspective and the plot started to become much more complicated. But the question that's always been on my mind is, why would Anno do this? This is where I think it all stems back to his view of himself. Anno has stated in the past that he's not very fond of who he is, and because of this, he is very hard on himself.
やらなきゃよかっただけはできるだけ思わないようにしたんですよね。
ああ、それはなんかね、すっごい後ろ向きだよね。でもね、世の中やらなきゃよかったなんてことないから大丈夫だよ。
Evangelion became a way to work out these issues, but unfortunately when he saw those parts of himself that he hated reflected in the audience, he couldn't help but want to reprimand them for using their obsession with fantasy to escape from facing their own problems. Evangelion is essentially a harsh rejection of the anime fandom, but even more than that, it's a search for identity. That's why to focus on the lore and get caught up in the plot points of Evangelion is to miss the bigger picture and also bound to lead to disappointment. As Anno makes very clear with his original TV ending, the most important part for him was always the characters and having them resolve their issues, because this was part of him finding his own answers. However, it's hard to blame anyone that does get stuck trying to figure out all the mysteries and loose ends of the series. From the complexity of the show and the amount of staggering detail in just the End of Evangelion alone, it really feels like Anno enjoys little details so much to the point that it oppresses him. He fused Eva with everything he loved, all of his obsessions, which are also what fueled his own escapism in the years before Eva. By doing this, he takes the elements of fantasy and twists them into something unsettling, uncomfortable, and downright voyeuristic. Knowing the reception of his original ending, the End of Evangelion doubles down on his pain and desperation, and this time delivers it with anger. I believe it's the same central message, but here it's like he was purposely trying to get the audience to experience what it's like to be stuck in his mind, furiously and rapidly being distracted by torrents of emotions and past failures that haunt him and keep him from wanting to face himself. This intermingles with the chaotic visuals that represent his own feelings being reflected on the screen, while also distracting the audience with spectacle, to eventually reveal to them that this is just as much about him as it is about them, and that if they don't change first, nothing will ever change for them. All these details are combined with his pessimistic worldview and the rejection that he's felt trying to communicate with other people. While this final film is not directly about Anno, it's hard to separate the two considering how much of himself he put into it. Another reason why I believe this film is about Anno just as much as the rest of the series is based on his previous statements about Evangelion. He has described Evangelion as a puzzle, and when asked about the mysteries in Evangelion, he has said something along the lines of, there are no easy answers and they won't be given to you, because in life people need to come up with their own answers. Combining these statements with the fact that Anno has said he has trouble expressing himself unless it's through his work, it's as if he was saying, you need to figure out who I am and make your own judgment about me through my work, because I can't tell you. Figure out the puzzle that is my mind. And I believe that's why people can see themselves in Eva, because they're looking at Anno. He did say that he burned his feelings into film, he burned his essence. One prime example of this is a popular TV show that Anno participated in back in 1999. In it, he revisited the town he grew up in and taught a class at his old primary school. The assignment involved Anno giving a lesson to the children. Anno's lesson was having them experience his childhood for themselves by visiting his parents and the places that he liked to frequent when he was growing up, and the point of the exercise was for the children to piece together who he was and to come to their own answers about him. This shows that Anno has always been at the center of his work. Bringing it back to Evangelion, Anno is even in his characters. Asuka and Shinji are two sides of Anno. The otaku that wants the world to change around him and hides in his hobby, and the guy who puts high expectations on himself to achieve more, to do more, to create something great. Evangelion is mired in imperfection and unsatisfaction, but I believe that's the point of Eva. It's not about what you expect, it's about what is. The End of Evangelion screams to the world to look at all the negative parts of him, to look at everything wrong with him, to look at how he can't even save himself when he knows better, but he keeps repeating the same self-destructive actions. It's a very angry and violent film that's selfish and shoves his issues onto others, knowing that he's in a vicious cycle that he isn't able to escape. But the movie is not that far removed from what came before it. It's just the breaking point. Even from the beginning, the show is in a constant state of stopping and starting through its protagonist Shinji, because that's what actually happens when you have someone that's struggling with themselves, but knows this is their last chance to make a change. And this is the part where I come up with my own answers. Anno didn't know where he wanted to go from the beginning. He just put himself into it, into the robot. The machine is the production, and he kept forcing himself back in because he knew he couldn't run away anymore. He had to face his fears, but it started with him doing what he knew best, taking all of his influences and making a generic anime mecha story with him as the protagonist. And when he saw that this wasn't leading him anywhere personally, he took a different direction to really figure out what was layered beneath. The salvation narrative became a salvation narrative of his own mind, his own soul. Subconsciously, the angels, the Evas, all these savior figures in mythology and religion, he started tearing them down. He started tearing down everything that could get you to escape from yourself, including the narrative itself. The Evas are man-made. Second Impact was started by man. The threat is actually the organization we're working for. What else can we grab onto? Who else can save us? People. That's it. People. Help me. Look at me. But the people, they're just as flawed too. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. So if there's no one to rely on, if there's nothing to save me, then what do I do? Who can save me? Only you. can save you. That is the purpose. That is the point of Evangelion. The New Century Gospel is you finding your own salvation within yourself instead of relying on external sources to lift you up. Because all of that will just be temporary unless you start choosing you. Until you start accepting everything ugly you see in the mirror and recognizing that those are all equal parts you, you'll never get to know your truest self. You'll never give yourself the chance. This is your reality. Learn to love the things you can't change. The little imperfections, give them a chance. And change the things you can actually change. It's so simple, but so hard. It's not fucking easy to accept yourself. I say this as if it is. Anno did what he needed for him, just like I needed to do this for me. You look to others for help, but they're just as flawed. At the end of the day, no one can save you from your feelings if you don't start by actively changing how you engage with them. What makes me look at Evangelion with understanding is that it emotionally resonates with me. I see the imperfect man for who he is as just another human that was trying to find answers. It might be seen as selfish, but I see it as brave. To put all of yourself on the screen for everyone to see without compromising your vision, that takes courage. I don't think this should absolve Evangelion from its flaws or exalt it as a perfect work, but I also don't think it should undercut the value or the beauty of its limitations. Limitations and working around them are what push the medium and creativity itself forward. You must accept your own first in order to move forward, because no one's perfect, so stop expecting yourself to be. But that also shouldn't be used as an excuse to not try harder. Another person can pick you up once, maybe twice, but when it comes down to it, you have to carry your own weight. And it'll only feel lighter once you stop choosing what you think you should be and start choosing who you are. Hey guys, I know it's been a while, but this video was very, very important to me. So if you enjoyed it, please give it a like. If you'd like to share your own thoughts on Evangelion, or just let me know about any struggles you've had with expectations, share it in the comments below. And if you're new to the channel and have a little bit of patience, then hit that subscribe button. Not to worry, my Discord channel has demanded that I be more consistent with my upload schedule from now on, so wish me luck. And on that note, if you'd like to roast me with everyone else on Discord for not uploading fast enough, then join my Discord. You can also follow me on Twitter, and last but not least, I'm OniMaru, and I'll see you guys in the next video, which hopefully won't take 5 months this time.